and then Jane will begin the meeting here.
Thanks, Brad. Because we do sometimes have bandwidth issues, I've got my camera turned on right now so I could say hello to everybody, but I think I'll probably turn that off as we start going through the meeting. So good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll take you through tonight a high-level overview of the changes in the proposed Summer Village of Betula Beach land use bylaw, and then we will focus on what the areas that were primary to or the most important focus of the review and the more significant changes that have been proposed to the document so that we can make sure that we're drawing your attention to those areas in particular, so that as you're doing your own review of the draft land use bylaw, you can have the opportunity to focus on those areas. The structure of the information being provided tonight is I guess we're assuming that you may not yet have had the opportunity to review the entire document. So we want to flag for you areas where it's of particular importance that you have a look at any changes that have been proposed so that you do have the opportunity to share with council your feedback. Following the meeting tonight, there'll be a period of approximately a month where you'll have the opportunity to get in touch with us to ask any questions as you do your own review of the document, or if you have any questions about any of the information that we provide this evening, to reach out to us to have a further conversation about any of those things. So if you haven't read the whole land use bylaw at this point, don't worry, it's okay. You've still got some time to do that, and we encourage you to do that and reach out to us with any questions or concerns that you may have. So tonight we'll just go over what a land use bylaw is for anyone who's unfamiliar with this type of a land use bylaw or this type of bylaw. We'll talk about what's in the current bylaw and some of the changes in the proposed. We'll go over some of the modernization and focused review objectives that were identified by council, just so that you're aware of what the direction and guidance from council and administration was as we went through the process. We'll talk about where we are in the project to date and then summarize those proposed changes and next steps. So all municipalities in Alberta have a land use bylaw. They're mandatory bylaws. So it doesn't matter if you're teeny tiny, like say Point Allison, or Betula Beach sized, or the city of Edmonton sized. Everybody has to have one. They all have to establish processes for development permit applications and subdivision within a municipality. They identify how notification will be provided to residents within the municipality and then people adjacent to and agencies and municipalities adjacent to a municipality. And they also identify what enforcement measures and appeal opportunities are available in relation to subdivision and development decisions and then enforcement orders. Land use bylaws establish regulations for specific types of land uses and general types of land uses that can occur within a municipality. The specific land uses relate to defined land use classes that are listed as permitted and discretionary in the districts. And the general provisions relate to different types of, I guess, development activities that occur on a lot that are separate from those use classes. All land use bylaws also identify and establish districts, and they divide the municipality into different districts. Within each district, they identify different permitted and discretionary uses that can be approved within the district. There's a really significant difference between permitted and discretionary uses. The first one is that permitted uses, if they comply with all provisions in a land use bylaw, are allowed by right, so that they must be approved. And then discretionary uses can be approved or refused depending on whether or not what's being proposed in the location that it's being proposed is appropriate. Anytime a development permit application isn't approved, there have to be reasons for why it isn't approved, and they have to be reasons that make sense. They have to pertain to suitability of the proposed development and the suitability of the proposed lot that it is intended to be placed upon. So none of the decisions relating to those things are arbitrary, but a use, in order for it to be approved or development to be approved in a municipality, has to be identified as a permitted or discretionary use in the district. These bylaws are often the longest bylaw that a municipality will adopt and have, and they're a little bit more dense than other types of bylaws, I guess because of what they have to identify and address. and also in order to ensure that they are reasonably enforceable. So in the event that a municipality has to enforce a provision in the bylaw, it has to be defensible and enforceable. The current land use bylaw that's in effect today was approved in 2014. So it blows my mind that it's already 10 years old. I feel like it was not that long ago that we were working on that document, but it's over 10 years old. Normally, land use bylaws are reviewed and updated every 10 years. So the Summer Village is right on track for having a look at this document and updating it. The existing land use bylaw is approximately 86 pages long, so it's not terribly complex. It's appropriately scaled for the size of the community. Unfortunately, though, it's not currently consistent with some of the changes that have been made at the provincial level that affect the Municipal Government Act, regulations that support the Municipal Government Act, some policies like the wetland policy, and then just different direction and other guidance documents that have been developed by the province of Alberta. So it is now a time to review and update the land use bylaw just to address those inconsistencies and to ensure that the regulations and the application requirements and the time frames that are legislative time frames established under provincial legislation and then carried forward into the land use bylaw are consistent with one another, and that they aren't right now because of those changes that were made at the province with the province. So in addition to that, the land use bylaw has been amended twice, which isn't a lot of amendments. It means the document was generally working as it should. Those areas that needed to be updated or amended and revised have been amended and revised, apart from the ones that require the legislative changes or are in response to the legislative changes. So part of what this process is doing too is it's taking those amendments and incorporating them into the new land use bylaw. So all of the changes will be accounted for, and the document will accurately reflect all of the amendments that have occurred. And then the last little bit there that was a focus of this review was to ensure that the regulations and the direction in the land use bylaw is consistent with the policy direction that's in the Summer Village's newer municipal development plan and intermunicipal development plan. So the land use bylaw is supposed to be this tool that enables the municipality to work towards achieving the goals, objectives, and policies that are established through the municipal development plan. And now that the MDP has been approved, there was some tweaks that needed to be made to the land use bylaw to ensure that it was functioning in that manner, so that it was an appropriate tool to help meet those goals and objectives and satisfy those policies. So the focused review objectives that guided this project were to ensure consistency with the updated provincial legislation and regulations, to ensure consistency with the Summer Village's higher level statutory plans, so that's the municipal development plan and intermunicipal development plan, to reflect current property boundary mapping information, so just to make sure that the mapping work and line work is still accurate, to reduce wherever possible red tape associated with the application and approval processes for subdivision and development permit applications, and to provide greater clarification about what types of things would be required in support of an application, especially in relation to development permits, and then clarify what types of conditions might be applied to an approval, just so that there's more transparency in the process, to shorten the document's length wherever it was possible to do so, and to address modern land use and development pressures that just weren't things that were on our radar, and municipalities didn't have to address them 10 years ago or so when the last land use bylaw was updated and approved. And then the last bit is to implement watershed management best practices where appropriate to do so, as identified and as established through the Summer Village's municipal development plan. So to date, municipal planning services, council and administration have met to discuss specific land use and development matters that council and administration identified as being important to address through this process. So any areas where things weren't working exactly the way they needed to be, or changes that they had identified as they've used the documents for the last 10 years, that needed to be updated to make them more effective and efficient, so that we had that direction. And then we provided some input about the types of experiences we've had with similar communities. So the other summer villages around the lake, and then some of the other lake communities that we work with, and some of the rural municipalities adjacent to or in close proximity, some of those development pressures that we've seen there, so that even though perhaps some of those experiences weren't shared experiences with Betula Beach, we know they're coming. Like they're in the wings, and we wanted to make sure that these documents would reflect and be able to address any types of developments that might be applied for within the community where either they would be very desirable or they perhaps would not be as desirable, so that there was direction within the land use bylaw to help the development authority make decisions when those applications or if those applications arose. Then a newsletter was sent out to residents in January of 2024, announcing the project and just letting everybody know that this was underway. There was a survey that was sent out in the spring and winter of 2024. 15 responses were completed. A summary of the survey responses was provided to council and administration in the summer of 2024, and where direction could be provided based on the survey results, council provided us with direction that enabled us to begin preparation of the draft land use bylaw for council's review in the fall, winter of 2024 and 2025. So that's where we are. So we did the preliminary engagement to get some direction to help figure out what areas to focus on, in addition to those areas that we knew that needed to be updated. And then we met with council and reviewed the draft document, made additional changes to the draft document to address council's input and feedback. And now that the document is in, I guess, a format that council is comfortable with, it's being presented to you, the community, for your feedback, so that we know whether or not we're going in the right direction, or if there are additional changes that need to be made to ensure that this is the most appropriate document for your community. So the next bit I'd like to take you through is just a summary of what the changes are, or which sections have been revised or updated within the land use bylaw. And I guess I'll preface this with the comment that all of the sections have been updated a little bit. So there's some sections that are entirely new, like a list of amendments. We've started over the last few years to add a list of amendments to the very beginning of every land use bylaw, because we found working with small communities that if we don't do that, sometimes it's hard to track down all of the amendments that have occurred. And it's really difficult to use a land use bylaw if you don't know if the version that you're looking at is the most up-to-date version. So including that list where amendments can be tracked at the beginning of the document just helps to ensure that you know you're looking at the most current, up-to-date live document. And it also seems to help ensure that all of the amendments end up in the same place. So that's just a structural change to the document that we found. It makes it a lot easier ultimately to track any changes that occur over the 10-year period that the land use bylaw is in effect. There's also a new guide to using the land use bylaw that's been updated, and that's intended to just assist anyone using the document with understanding how a land use bylaw works. Because you can't just look at one part of a land use bylaw, you generally have to look at 2 to 3 different sections in order to determine what it is exactly that you want to do in relation to the language of the document, and then whether or not it's allowed in the location that you'd like to put it, and if there's any other provisions that would apply that would change or affect how it is constructed or where it's constructed on the lot. So that's been updated a little bit. Then the first section of the document, the administration section, has also been updated just to ensure consistency with requirements. There's a couple new sections that have been added: a scope section, a commencement section, and a repeal section. Area of application is new, conformity, compliance, and a severability clause are new. So these parts don't really impact, I guess, what you can and cannot do on your property, but they just help to ensure that the bylaw itself is a defensible bylaw. The authority section provides information about who has the authority to issue decisions about different aspects of land management within the municipality. So this section has been updated as well to clarify where council's roles are in that process, where the development officer's roles are, and the subdivision authority's roles, and then also the subdivision and development appeal boards or the land and property rights tribunal, as is the case in some subdivision and development decisions. Previously, it just identified the development authority's role in relation to administering the land use bylaw, but that there are other types of authorities that are enabled through the Municipal Government Act that relate directly to the types of processes and decisions issued under the land use bylaw that it was important to provide a little bit more clarification about. The interpretation section is primarily a definition section. So this section has been updated as well. The existing land use bylaw had about 183 definitions and the draft has 214. So it hasn't been expanded substantially. I think the more significant changes to the definition section were a review of the section to try and provide greater consistency between the terms that are utilized in the document and the terms that are defined. And generally, we do another sweep through right before we get into the adoption of the bylaw, just to go back and check and make sure that as changes have been made to the document, either through the review process with council and administration, or as a result of feedback from the community after the public engagement on the bylaw occurs, that we haven't inserted through those changes inconsistent language. So we'll go back and have another sweep through just to ensure consistency between the words used and the words that are defined, because it just makes the bylaw so much easier to understand when those terms are consistent and there's a definition for them. The new terms that have been added are more technical terms that I guess if you work with these types of documents a lot, you know what they mean, but if you just are looking at the document to use them from time to time as they relate to a specific development on your lot, it's more helpful to have the term defined, and they weren't before in the bylaw. So now we have things like adjacent landowner, environmentally sensitive area, geotechnical report, historic resources, landscaping plan, and real property report as defined terms. So it's a little bit clearer what they're intended to mean or entail when they're used in the bylaw. And then some more specific uses that really should be always defined because they're use classes. We did a sweep through just to make sure that all of those defined, permitted, and discretionary uses also have a corresponding definition. So examples would be minor and major home occupations, garden suites, which are a new use for this draft bylaw, tented structure, tourist home. So that's the interpretation section is always kind of long and it can be a little bit painful to go through, but it's a really important section of the bylaw. So I'd encourage you to have a look at that section too, just to make sure that as you're reviewing the document to see what the impacts may be for you personally and your property, you're figuring out what district your property is in, you're looking at what uses are listed as permitted or discretionary, and then just check out the interpretation section as well to make sure that your understanding of what those terms mean is consistent with how they're applied in the document. Section 4 is the amendment section, and this one has just been updated to provide greater clarification about how the land use bylaw can be amended. Because the land use bylaw can be amended either as a result of direction from administration or council to address a concern that's arisen in their use of the document, or it can also be amended by as a result of a request from someone within the municipality who, in wanting to do development of their property, identifies something that is not enabled through the land use bylaw and they'd like to see a change. So this just provides greater clarification about how that process is undertaken, what would be required as part of the application, what the steps are that the municipality goes through in reviewing and accepting the application, to provide a bit more transparency about those processes. Section 5 deals with development permits specifically. It describes the processes for applying and reviewing development permit applications. And this section has been significantly updated to reflect more modern application requirements, provincial legislative changes, and to ensure that as development is occurring, it can happen in an economical and orderly fashion. So I think one of the challenges with some of the older land use bylaws, and yours is not, it's not a 20-year-old land use bylaw, so it did already address a few of these things, but the lake is in some ways, a less complicated place to do development and a much, much more complicated place to do development than, say, a city. So sometimes people will say, well, we're just at the lake. Why is this so complicated? Well, it's because you're at the lake. It's so complicated. It is an absolutely beautiful place to be and to be able to enjoy. But doing development in areas where there are not only environmentally sensitive features, but features that, depending on what's going on, can also be considered hazard features. Makes I guess your duty or responsibility to ensure that the money that you're about to invest into your property is going to be safe. It's going to be okay. It takes a little bit more information to prove that that site is a suitable location for where you want to do that development. So, if you're developing on a piece of flat land with no water nearby, there aren't the same sorts of concerns about site suitability as there certainly are when you're developing near water. And so additional information is often required in those situations just to ensure that the site is suitable for what you want to put on it to protect you and then also to protect, I guess, your neighbors. And we're thinking about surface and groundwater impacts. Often we're finding when people do development at the lake, they're building up, and the amount of the lot that is covered with hard surface, so buildings, driveways, all of those sorts of things is increasing. It's not the same kind of development that did happen 30, 40 years ago with just little cottages. The developments and investments in people's lake lots are much more significant. And so the municipality has a duty to ensure that as they're reviewing those applications, they're thinking about the hazards, right? And how that type of development and that scale of development might impact municipal property, adjacent properties, and then also the quality of the lake water, which is the reason most of you are there, right? To enjoy the lake. So those are all additional bits of information that have been provided to make it a little bit easier to understand and to know what to expect with your applications, so that you can better time and cost out your project before you apply. 5.1 deals specifically with the control of development. It identifies that and when development permits are required to ensure development is achieved in an orderly manner, which is consistent with the requirements of the Municipal Government Act. It also identifies the responsibilities of what the development proponent needs to do. So what you as a landowner need to be responsible for as part of that process. 5.2 provides that more specific information about when you don't need to apply for a development permit. The easiest way to think about that is if what you want to do is not specifically identified in section 5.2 as not requiring a permit, then you probably need a development permit for it. And if you're just not sure, the best thing to do is to reach out to the municipality, either to Emily or to the development officer, and ask them. Just give them a rundown. This is what I'm thinking about doing. It doesn't cost any money to ask the question, and get some direction in that regard. And that will help you, I think, as you're thinking about your project and the timing for your project and all of those things too. The other thing to note, I think, that's really important is that if what you want to do is listed as a type of development that doesn't require a permit, but you don't ensure that the height, lot area, coverage maximums, side, front, rear yard setbacks, all of those things are adhered to, then you do trigger the need for development permits. So even that list of things that you don't require a development permit for, you would require a development permit for if any other provision in the land use bylaw would have to be varied in order to put it in the location you want to put it. So you have to be thinking about that too. And that's why I think it's just in your best interest to just reach out to someone and ask if you're not sure whether or not you're going to need a development permit for it. This list has been updated to include a couple of things that were excluded previously as developments not requiring permits. So some of the changes include identifying that you don't need a development permit for up to a maximum of one accessory building, not on a fixed foundation in the rear yard of a residential parcel, as long as it doesn't exceed 9.3 meters squared or 100.1 feet squared in floor area, and 2.5 meters or 8.2 meters in height. You don't need a development for the construction or repair of retaining walls up to 1.2 meters or 3.9 feet in height. For minor home occupations, for micro wind energy systems, so that would be like, I don't know if any of you are real rural people. If you have like a little wind energy, like a little wind turbine to help keep water moving on a dugout or something like that. So very, very small. Or if you have a special landscaping and you've got a little bit of a micro wind energy system to assist with the landscaping provisions, those would be those scale of system. And then the other one is landscaping that does not affect offsite surface drainage. And the reason that one's been added is because landscaping that would affect how water drains off of the lot onto adjacent properties or towards the lake does require a development permit. So this needed to be clarified and identified. If you're bringing in a little bit of dirt for your garden, but you're not really dramatically affecting how the surface water is going to run, you don't need a permit for that. You carry on with your gardening. But if you are recontouring your property and doing that scale of landscaping and the water is going to run off the property in a different way, then that does trigger a requirement for a development permit. And that's just to make sure that you don't send the water in a direction that's going to negatively impact your neighbor's property, which we've seen. So 5.3 deals with non-conforming buildings and uses. It identifies how developments that don't conform to the land use bylaw when the new land use bylaw is approved ultimately will be addressed. And it's been updated to include references to non-conforming buildings and use provisions as they're identified within the Municipal Government Act. So generally, when we have engagement for land use bylaws, people will say, well, what if what I have on my property today doesn't comply with the provisions in the new land use bylaw? And the answer to that always is, as long as what you have on your property today was approved, so you have development permits for it, or it's been there for so long it predates the first land use bylaw, which happens from time to time, then that development's considered a legal non-conforming use and it can carry forward. It's legal non-conforming. If you have something on your property that you didn't get approvals for, and in the new land use bylaw it's not allowed, then today it's non-conforming. It's not supposed to be there. And going forward, it would continue to be non-conforming, so not supposed to be there. So as long as you have approval for what you've got on your property today, those approvals carry forward. 5.4, it deals with development permit applications specifically. It identifies what will or may be required to be submitted in support of a development permit application. So there's some situations where in all instances, there will be a set of requirements that all applications must have to submit. And then there are other types of things that a development authority might need to see or to have you include depending on what it is that you're proposing to build or where it is that you're proposing to build it. And so that list of things that may be required has been added to the bylaw to provide greater clarification for you, just so that you know that these are things that, depending on your specific site or the scale of what it is that you want to build on that specific site, may also need to be provided in support of the application, just to demonstrate that the site is suitable. And that you're not going to have an issue with slope instability or high groundwater table or impacts to a wetland, or you're not going to undertake lot regrading, recontouring, and landscaping that negatively impact your neighbors. So that information's been provided in this section just to improve the transparency. There's requirements for post-construction site and building elevations, just to ensure that once the building or the lot has been redeveloped and the buildings have gone up, that the recontouring has happened in a manner that's consistent with what's been approved. And then identification, a requirement for the identification or location of all proposed footings or dwellings and accessory buildings once they've been constructed. So one of the challenges that I guess all municipalities with smaller lots in particular, it's not such a big deal for the rurals, where if your building is not sited where it was approved to be sited, you're still meters and meters and meters away from property boundaries. But in where there are smaller lots, if you don't put your building where your building is supposed to be put, it can create negative impacts, not just for you, but also for your neighbors too. So municipalities are moving towards requiring you to identify that you put your building in the approved location as a condition of approval. This can happen a couple of different ways. One of them is to just require the surveyor to identify the location of the footings or the foundation prior to carrying on to the next step of your construction, and submitting that to the municipality so that you can catch it before you've gone too far. The other is to require as a condition of approval a lot grading and drainage certificate that also identifies the location of the footing or the foundation as well, so that you can double check both of those things. One, that the building is in the location that it was supposed to go in, and two, that ultimately the lot grading and drainage plan that was approved has been adhered to, so there isn't going to be any issue. And that protects you, and it also protects the municipality and your neighbors as you go forward. Just in case there are issues or there is a conflict in the future, you can demonstrate that you did everything that you were told to do, directed to do, and you're in compliance. So that's an addition two here. Then one of the changes that is a little bit of a relaxation actually from the existing land use bylaw is that there was an amendment done to the land use bylaw that required a real property report to be submitted always as a shall with applications for development. And sometimes that's too much. It's not always necessary to have an RPR, a surveyor to come out. If your building is just a little building and it's not going to be too close to a neighbor, or it's not going to obviously potentially impact slope stability or groundwater or surface water drainage, any of those things, it just sometimes it's a bit overkill. And I don't think the intention of the amendment was to do that. It just was a wording issue. So the proposed change here is that a real property report may be required for new buildings, additions, or if the development authority believes there's an issue with the proposed development and its location within the lot's boundaries. So if you're the development authority or you are not sure where your property boundaries are, then an RPR is pretty valuable to have as part of your site plan so that you can confirm that you where those property boundaries are and where your building is going to be located. Additionally, if the building is a big substantive building, it is beneficial to invest in that RPR to ensure that you are putting the building where you think you're putting the building before you go too far along with your construction. So may is the change. Is going from shall to may and indicating when or what the triggers would be for requiring that real property report as part of the application. And then conditions. 5.5 deals with applications for demolition and the removal of buildings. This is a new section. The existing land use bylaw doesn't have specific provisions that relate to demolition, and it's a bit overdue. It's time for that to be clarified. So this section provides that clarification, and it indicates when a permit is required for demolition of a structure. Essentially, if you need a development permit for it to go up, you need a development permit for it to come down. 5.6 deals with notice of complete or incomplete applications. The Municipal Government Act requires that municipalities, once they receive an application for a development permit or a subdivision application, they have 20 days to deem it complete. This was a legislative change, and municipalities have to include in their land use bylaw a section that indicates how they will provide notice of whether or not the application has been deemed complete or incomplete and what form that notice will be in, and it needs to be included in the land use bylaw. So this has been inserted in order to ensure compliance with that update to the Municipal Government Act. 5.7 provides information about development permit notices. And that's also been updated to reflect new development permit notification processes that are enabled through the Municipal Government Act. And then 5.8 deals with conditions and development agreements. So development agreements they're a kind of condition that get applied at time of subdivision or development permit application. The legal advice that municipalities have been provided indicates that development permits and land use bylaws are much more defensible if more specific information is disclosed within the land use bylaw about the types of conditions that might be applied. And it improves, I think, the transparency too of the land use bylaw, but it also lets you know what to expect or what you might expect as a condition of approval when you're applying for a development permit within a municipality. So I think this is an important update and addition to the document because it gives you a little bit more information and security, I guess, about what you should expect as a potential condition with your approvals. 5.9 addresses the cancellation of permits. It doesn't happen very often, but from time to time, something will arise that results in the municipality needing to cancel a development permit. So this just provides a bit more clarification about when that might occur. I'm trying to think of situations over the last 20 years where I've seen that happen. And really, like the two scenarios that I can envision or we have experienced in some capacity would be where someone applies for a development permit, they submit a site plan, go through the process, it's approved, and then a week later they decide they actually want to make a change. They've been talking with their builder and now they want to do something a little bit different on the backside of the property or backside of the building. And so the information that they submitted with the original application is no longer accurate. It doesn't reflect what they want to build. And so that development permit would be considered invalid. It's canceled and a new development permit is issued that reflects the new form or footprint of the building. So that's one scenario that I have seen it, probably 2 or 3 times in the last year. Another scenario would be where the development authority issued a permit in error. They made a mistake. Those do not happen very often. Like I can think over the last 20 years, I can maybe think of two where an error was made and the municipality had to rescind the approval and reissued the decision with a correction. Or, you know, some other kind of process or change needed to occur in order to ensure that the development on the site could be approved and it would conform to the land use bylaw. So those are two scenarios where a permit might need to be canceled, either as a result of a change or error in the information that was submitted originally, or as a result of an error on the part of the development authority when processing the application. Doesn't happen very often. And so the next section deals with variances. From time to time, someone will apply for something that they want to construct within a municipality that doesn't conform to the land use bylaw. So this section provides information about what types of variances can be granted. And it identifies what the development authority must consider when they're reviewing a variance request. And then it also provides some limitations on the types of variances that can be approved by the development officer. So this section has been updated. This section, there's a provision here now that says that no variance will be granted for requests to exceed the maximum parcel coverage or site coverage on a lot. So if, the maximum site coverage is, I can't remember what it is, Brad, in the district. Do you remember?
I'll look it up here, Gene.
Yeah, I'm going to give you a number, but it may not be the right number. Brad will correct me if I'm wrong, but say it were 45%, and you were applying for buildings that would exceed the 45%, the development authority would not have the discretion to grant a variance to approve that. The only way you could exceed the maximum lot coverage percentage for that lot would to go through the appeal process. I sent you on a hunt, Brad. Sorry about that. But I think that explains the point. 511 relates to the issuance of compliance certificates. This is a new section, and it just provides a bit of information about what would be required in order to request a certificate of compliance, and some information about the review process that's undertaken by the development authority. Section 6 relates specifically to the subdivision process, and it provides information about the types of things that would have to accompany the application. It includes information that reflects new MGA requirements for deeming the application complete or incomplete. That's that 20 days thing I was mentioning with development permits. It clarifies what types of decisions the subdivision authority can issue, so approve with conditions or without conditions or refuse a subdivision application, and it establishes what types of conditions might be issued as part of an approval. Section 7 deals with the whole appeal process as it relates to subdivision and development. This section's been updated because the Municipal Government Act was one of the amendments to it, changed how the appeal process works for development permits, most specifically. It used to be, prior to those changes, that any appeal of a development permit decision was made to the local subdivision and development appeal board. Now, depending on different triggers that are identified within the Municipal Government Act and the matters related to subdivision and development regulation, some development permit appeals are heard by the local subdivision development appeal board, and some are heard by the Land and Property Rights Tribunal. The triggers that are identified for when a development permit appeal goes to the Land and Property Rights Tribunal are intended to ensure that if the development that's being proposed is a type of development or on or in a location where the province might have an interest in that type of development as a result of what's been proposed or where it's been proposed, then the appeal is heard by the province, by the Land and Property Rights Tribunal. So that, I believe that's the intention of that change. So many of the triggers relate to things like, landfills, uh, lots where there is an approval issued under the AER or AUC, so power, those sorts of things. Um, but there are some other ones that are a little bit broader in scope that will catch some appeals that are within the summer village as well. Um, and that would be approvals licenses or what is it? Approvals licenses or I can't remember, I think it's orders made by the Minister of the Environment. So there's some things there where we just have to check to make sure there isn't a historic something that would result in appeal going to the province instead of the local subdivision and development appeal board. So that happens from time to time now, even within the summer villages. This section separates out the processes for development and subdivision appeals as they're outlined in the Municipal Government Act, and then it provides a bit more information about the hearing process itself and the timelines related to those processes, just to improve, to provide a bit more information about those things. Section 8 provides information about enforcement. So in the event that a development occurs within the summer village and it doesn't comply with the land use bylaw or conditions that were issued under an approval, this section provides information about how the municipality can go about enforcing the bylaw and identifying the steps necessary to ensure that the development on the site will comply and conform with the land use bylaw. So the whole process of this is, is to find a path forward to compliance, essentially. So it provides information about, what enforcement options are available. Really, we're talking about, issuing warnings. Sometimes there's tags or tickets that have fines, and then ultimately stop orders enforceable through the courts. But the hope is, whenever a municipality is utilizing this section, is it's just identifying that something has occurred that needs to be corrected and identifying the path forward to compliance to resolve the issue. So, Brad, this is where I'm going to turn it over to you, and you can talk a little bit more specifically about some of the specific changes that have been made to different use classes or types of development within the municipality as they relate to the general and specific types of land uses. The areas that have been flagged here are those areas that are red in red. And those are areas where, as we were going through the review with council and administration, council identified as being really important to point out to the community to make sure that we're getting your feedback on in particular. So Brad, I'll turn it over to you here.
Yeah, thanks, Jane. And just going back to your earlier question, 40% is the lot coverage maximum on a lot. So that's not something that is being tweaked in between the current land use bylaw and the draft land use bylaw. Just clarifying what Jane was mentioning, and maybe I'll even just take a further step back. In the current land use bylaw, there are 29 different subsections that deal with these specific land use and development matters or general land use and development matters. And these are the type of things that happen in your community that you would expect there to be rules and regulations on whether these are things that can be built and used in your community or whether they should be prohibited outright. Right now, there are approximately 29 different sections that deal with different matters. In reviewing them, we've combined a few of them, and in other situations, we've either created entirely new subsections or have kind of pulled a few apart to allow them to stand alone as their own topic, so that they had a little bit more prominence in the draft document. And this really kind of bumped it up to 34. So really, we're adding five more kind of minor sized in terms of the overall length of the document, number of subsections within it. The ones shown in red are um, subjects that do not currently have their own standalone sections in the current land use bylaw. The ones in yellow are the ones that council and administration in our meetings with them have flagged for us to just kind of explain a little bit more to community members as to why these sections are in here or why there may have been changes to them, just so that you can have an understanding of some of the more significant changes to the draft land use bylaw. So if at any point as we kind of cover each of these little yellow subjects, If you have questions, maybe shoot them to Jane or myself as we go. If there are questions that we can kind of answer on the fly, otherwise we can open it up for discussion at the end. Jane, if you don't mind adjusting to the next slide.
I'm trying. I'm sorry, Brad.
It's okay.
It's very sensitive. We're gonna try this another way. There we go. Okay, I've got it.
Perfect. So accessory buildings and uses. Accessory buildings are standalone accessory buildings on a lot, whether they are a shed, a outbuilding of some sort, or something that isn't the dwelling on the lot. Your current land use bylaw does address these. In your current land use bylaws section that deals with developments that do not require a permit, it states that accessory buildings with a floor area less than 100 square feet may be developed without a development permit. It also states that the maximum height for an accessory building without a garage suite is 15 feet, and that the total floor area of all accessory buildings shall not exceed 1,000 square feet, or the floor area of the dwelling, whichever is lesser. On a lakefront lot, the accessory buildings can only be placed in the roadside yard, in the rear yard, which would be the roadside yard, and on back lots or non-lakefront lots, that would be towards the rear of the lot. And uh, the maximum height without a garage suite would be 15 meters, or sorry, 15 feet. Um, again, what is in the current land use, sorry, the current draft land use bylaw is that we've clarified a little bit with council about what their preference would be for those smaller accessory buildings that don't require a development permit. And what council had directed us to include and flag for community discussion is that a maximum of one accessory building may be developed on a lot without a development permit. If you would like a second one on a lot going forward, you can do so, but it would require going through the development permit process. And this is primarily to limit the number of smaller, perhaps less aesthetically consistent with the community accessory buildings that would be popping up on a lot without going through the development permit process. We've also clarified that accessory buildings may only be developed on a lot with an existing dwelling with an approved development permit. So if a situation exists where the lot in your community has no building on it at all, an accessory building can't be the first and only thing that gets developed on the lot. That there has to be a dwelling in place there first. The total area of all accessory buildings, we have not made a change to, nor have we made changes to where they may be placed or where they should be placed on a lot. And again, maximum height without a garage suite, there was no change there either. Boathouses are something that are addressed in your current land use bylaw, but the regulations are kind of wrapped up in the accessory building section. So we pull this out to be its own standalone subsection. In the current land use bylaw, it enables the development of boathouses on lakefront lots. Obviously, they wouldn't be placed on a back lot or a non-lakefront lot. But your land use bylaw, perhaps unique among many of the summer villages, is that it does enable the development of a boathouse. The current definition for a boathouse in your current land use bylaw indicates that it means an accessory building designed and used primarily for the storage of boats, and it's designed such that the main door faces the lake as to permit the direct removal of boats from the water to the structure. So it's an accessory building on the lakefront side that faces the water to enable the quick and easy removal of boats from the lake into an accessory building. They are listed as discretionary uses in the residential district. And right now, really the only regulation in there is that there's a maximum height requirement of 12 feet. So we've Based on council's direction, we've included regulations for boathouses in the draft land use bylaw. We've tweaked those regulations a bit to restrict the number. So it enables a maximum of one on a lakefront lot, and this would require a development permit. It specifically prohibits sleeping accommodations within a boathouse. So you can't have a boathouse become like a garden suite or an in-law suite. I think that's the intent in your current land use bylaw, but it's not explicitly listed as such. And we've included a few design criteria from our work with other land use bylaws in lake communities, and in doing your municipal development plan and working with watershed groups to identify how accessory buildings and other structures that are closer to the lake can be designed in such a way as they minimize the impact on water health and the lake health and water quality. So we've included some of the design criteria, things like low sloped roofs and gutters, use of rain barrels, and the structure being placed on piles and skids to um, just lessen the impact on the lake overall. There is environmental reserve in front of Betula Beach that we've explicitly stated that this cannot be placed within that area, lands owned by the Summer Village, and we've reduced a bit the maximum height of future boathouses so that they would be a maximum of 10 feet in height.
I just add that the purpose of that was to try and ensure that these buildings in this location, because they're on the lakeside, wouldn't obstruct views for adjacent property owners. So it's trying to figure out a way of balancing, the fact that you need a building to store the things that you use to enjoy the lake in. And it's easier to have that on the lake side. So to enable that without creating a situation where you might also then develop inadvertently a wall that impedes your neighbor's view of the lake.
Um, we've also dealt with recreational vehicles. The current land use bylaw does address recreational vehicles. It indicates that they cannot be occupied on a lot as a dwelling, so it cannot be the primary place where you reside on your lot. That's in the current land use bylaw today. It enables a maximum of one recreational vehicle to be stored on a lot without a development permit. And another RV may be placed on a lot temporarily without a development permit as well, as long as that's on a temporary basis. RVs on a lot today, according to the land use bylaw, can't be connected to utilities and services except for electricity. And any accessory building associated with it also can't be used as sleeping quarters. So the draft land use bylaw doesn't make too many dramatic changes here. Again, it can't be occupied on a lot as a dwelling, and it must be on a developed lot. So a dwelling has to be on the lot first in order for an RV to be out there. A maximum one RV may be stored on a lot without a development permit. So if you bring one out and put it on your driveway, you don't require a development permit for that. And you can have, again, one additional one for up to a week at a time without a development permit. Same sort of connection prohibitions and restrictions. Same thing for the accessory building, can't be used as a sleeping quarter. We've clarified in, I think, in the overall intent of your current land use bylaw that an RV can't be located in the front yard, the lakefront yard of a lakefront lot. And based on direction from administration and council, we've enabled situations where you may be having perhaps a family reunion or a significant birthday or other type of event, and you may want to have a couple of additional recreational vehicles on a very temporary basis. This can be done with going through a development permit process. So it would be the type of situation where you would need to let the Summer Village know, how many recreational vehicles, where they would be placed, how access would be provided, how safety and sight lines would be maintained, that sort of thing. Guest house suites is something that I guess, expanded upon in the draft land use bylaw based on what's currently in the land use bylaw. Right now, in your land use bylaw, you have the ability to develop a maximum of one garage or secondary suite on a lot. And again, this is the type of thing that can only be developed with on a lot that has an existing single detached dwelling. Um, Neither a garage or a secondary suite on a lot today is technically allowed to have food preparation or kitchen areas. You are allowed a bathroom and sleeping areas, but not to be developed in such a way that it would um, enable kind of long-term habitation by having kitchen and cooking spaces. The current land use bylaw only stipulates height and floor area requirements for garage suites. It doesn't get into the detail of that for secondary suites. So there aren't any kind of restrictions on how big or significant a secondary suite could be within a dwelling. And again, a secondary suite would be kind of like a basement suite or a space perhaps in the attic or in a portion of a dwelling, whereas a garage suite would be above or within a standalone garage building. In the draft land use bylaw, we've kind of enabled the same sort of approach, except we've expanded just a little bit to enable the development of garden suites as well, at council's direction. So a garden suite would be a standalone accessory building with the sole intent and purpose of providing temporary accommodation on a lot. Again, may only be developed on a lot with an existing single detached dwelling. Must be located in the rear yard only. Again, based on council's direction, no food preparation or kitchen areas. We've identified what the height and floor area requirements are for each of those structures. So garage suites, garages, accessory buildings developed as garages with a suite above it can be a little bit higher than accessory buildings without that suite component. Garden suite height, we've kept it at a reasonable 14 feet based on kind of the other summer villages in the area, and limited the portion of a dwelling that can be developed as a secondary suite so that it remains the um, secondary use of the building and not the primary, um, so that it doesn't create a situation where you're effectively developing a duplex on a lot. And we've also included some regulations in there just to ensure that Alberta Health Services and all safety code requirement regulations are met, so that any space where human habitation is going to be occurring is done in a way that is safe and healthy. Two other items that council flagged for us to raise tonight. C-cans. In your current land use bylaw, there was an amendment that dealt with C-cans, and it indicated that C-cans are not to be placed on a property for any period of time in any land use district. In the draft land use bylaw, again, they can't be used as an accessory building. They can't be developed as a dwelling. But it has enabled their placement on a lot for the purposes of supporting the construction of a single detached dwelling for up to 9 months. So if you are building a dwelling on a lot, putting a CCAN on it as part of your development permit application can be done if it is to kind of safely store building materials and tools and other stuff that you would need on site on a regular basis kept in a secure manner. So uh, that's kind of the only situation in which a CCAN would be allowed in the summer village. And again, we've kept it on a very temporary basis so that it doesn't continue to linger after the dwelling is built. Another topic raised is tourist homes. So Airbnb, short-term rental accommodations, that sort of thing. The Summer Villages land use bylaw currently doesn't enable short-term rental accommodations. It doesn't enable any commercial uses beyond kind of minor home occupations in the first place, or really any commercial conversion of a dwelling is not enabled. It's not something that is addressed. And in talking with council about it, and working with some of the other summer villages on the lake, I know Lakeview went this approach as well, was to include a definition for what a tourist home is. And we've just indicated that they are not allowed as a use type in the summer village. So this is flagged for anyone who has thoughts on this, whether in support of or that might have a contrary opinion to it. Again, right now, the draft land use bylaw is in draft form, so any input any folks might have on this or any other topic, we're happy to have that discussion and kind of include that in our report back to council. The last of these general and specific provision sections that council asked us to flag was on tree removal. In the current land use bylaw, the removal of trees isn't specifically addressed, although there are provisions in the development permit application section that talk about how some development permits, when we're talking about redeveloping a lot, um, they may have to include the submission of a landscaping plan or include conditions for how trees and planting of new trees are to be kind of maintained on a lot. Knowing how important tree cover is for the beauty of the community, for the overall health and longevity of the lake, and in recognizing that your municipal development plan um, covers this topic in insofar as it identifies the importance of the existing canopy in the summer village, and that older, more mature and larger trees are kind of coveted and should be retained where possible. We've included some regulations in here to ensure that kind of the unnecessary removal of trees is goes through a process where uh, the summer village can ensure that they're either replaced or protected in the event of lots are developed or redeveloped. Um, so the regulations in your municipal development plan today, which set the policy guidance for your land use bylaw, um, state that that the summer village wants to maintain and enhance the existing tree canopy, that the summer village wants to maintain and improve shoreline stabilization, and maintain and improve groundwater filtration. So trees do all of that work while we're not watching. Um, so in the draft land use bylaw, we have regulations in here that require a development permit when lots are to be cleared or removed of non-hazardous mature trees. So that development permit process can lead to identifying requirements for planting new trees or for retaining certain vegetation on the lot. If we're talking about dead, diseased, hazardous trees, so if a tree is starting to come down and is going to potentially hurt somebody or hurt property or block the road, that type of removal doesn't require a development permit. Same thing for if a tree is dead and obviously not going to survive much longer, or if it poses a threat by being diseased, that doesn't require a development permit. And it's not to kind of hinder, the landscaping on a lot, but it's to give the summer village a bit more control and guidance when lots are being completely cleared of vegetation and trees without any sort of plan for the restoration or replanting. So that goes through the proposed changes as it relates to the specific and general provisions. In those land use districts that Jane was talking about, the residential district and the park and recreation district, those are identified in sections 10 to 13, and identified on the land use district map as well. So it maps out where the residential lots are in the summer village and where the park and recreation districts are. as well. We haven't made too many changes to the districts. I think if anything, we've kind of tidied them up, made sure that the permitted and discretionary uses line up with the terms that are used in the definition section, and just give it some general formatting to just read a little bit easier and a little bit be a bit more clear in the intent of the regulations. Lands that are located between the lakefront lots and the lake that are now environmental reserve along the front of the summer village. Previously, they weren't identified as being within any district in the summer village. So we've worked with the summer village to just identify them as part of the park and recreation district. So I'll turn it back here to Jane just to talk about some of the next steps. And then if I've not noticed any folks indicating that they had questions to this point, but once Jane kind of gets through the next steps here, we can either collect any comments that might come through in the chat, or if folks want to unmute and ask a question, we can do that as well.
Thanks, Brad. So following the session tonight, we'll post the recording on the Summer Village's website, and we'll leave that there during the engagement period, which will extend until August 25th. So for the next month or so, if you have the opportunity to, you're out the lake talking to your neighbors, let them know that it is there, and it provides a summary of some of the changes to the document, and encourage them to review the document, or to have a look at the recording so that they have a bit more information about what's being proposed so they can provide their input to council. I think that would be very beneficial. The more feedback that council can receive on the draft document, the more council can ensure that the document reflects the needs of your community specifically. So this is the time, right, for you to provide us with that guidance and direction so that we can fine tune this and make it appropriate for you and what your needs are. So sometimes we don't know, what your plans are, and that can have an impact on how these processes go. So we need to hear from you now. So please, when you're sitting at the lake, on your deck, have a look at the document and reach out to us with any comments or questions or concerns that you might have, so that we can make sure council has all of that information to help guide them through the last stages of this project. So after the 25th, we'll prepare a report for council that summarizes the feedback that we receive and provide some recommended changes to address any of the comments or feedback that we receive for council's consideration. That'll be presented to council, and they will let us know what changes, if any, they would like made to the document to reflect that input. We'll make those adjustments to the document based on council's direction, and then prepare the document for first reading. So we'll make any changes council directs based on your comments, and then we'll do another sweep through the document. We'll go through this time again for a final formatting, check for language consistency, address any grammatical errors that we find, those sorts of things. We leave that final sweep right to the very end because it is such a long bylaw. We do make changes right up until sometimes second or third reading, even just in order to make sure that we can address appropriately the feedback that you provide and the direction from council. So it is a living document. It is not a completed document yet. It is really, really important that we hear from you. Once that report is prepared and council provides direction, we clean up the document, we get it ready for first reading. A notice will go out to the community letting you know that a public hearing has been scheduled. Public hearing is another opportunity for you to provide input to council directly on the bylaw. So they tend to be a bit more formal. They'll take place as part of a council meeting. I don't know if you guys, Emily, will you do your public hearing virtually, or do you do them in person?
I've done it both ways.
Done it both ways.
Yeah.
Depending on the time of year it is, the virtual option makes it sometimes a little bit easier for everybody to be able to attend. So when we provide the notice, we'll indicate how that will be held, if it's virtual or in person. And it might relate might be dependent on the time of year it is. If it's into the fall and people aren't going to be at the lake, it makes more sense to do it virtually. So just review the notice when it comes out, so that you know how to attend that public hearing. So the public hearing will be held. People will have the opportunity at that time to provide their testimony directly to council, and you just let them know whether you're in favor of or you have concerns with the bylaw that's being presented. Following the hearing, any testimony that's received will be summarized into a report that will go to council. If there are changes resulting from the testimony provided at the public hearing, we'll prepare an amending motion for council's consideration to incorporate those changes. And then the amending motion, if required, goes forward to council along with the bylaw with the amendments incorporated for consideration of second and third readings. So it's once we get into that part of the process, it's a little bit more formalized, but there's opportunities to make adjustments or changes to the bylaw right up until second and third readings are given. So lots of opportunities to ensure that your voices are heard, and then that any concerns that you have can be addressed through the process. So that's what will happen next. For the next month or so, we've turned the document over to you for you to look at and share your comments with us. And then we'll start moving into the final part of the process in the fall, likely so September, October, with council and administration, so that we meet with them again to address any additional changes and then move into that bylaw adoption process. So I think that's all we have for you this evening. Is there any questions or comments tonight?
Jane, I've not received any comments in here. I just enabled folks to unmute if you do have any questions you'd like to raise at this point that kind of you can't kind of type out it in the chat box if you'd like. Otherwise, as we end this, you may come up with a question 2 minutes after we've kind of hang up this call. Feel free to reach out to myself in our office. My email's up here on the screen, but you can give us a call as well. I know my phone number is on the Summer Villages website under the notice for this open house. Happy to have a chat about anything that you might think about or wake up in the middle of the night kind of dreaming about. Happy to have that conversation with you in the future.
Okay. Well, then with that, we'll end the meeting this evening. And I'd like to thank all of you for tuning in with us and spending your evening with us. It's not a rainy evening, but I'm sure there's other things you could be doing. So thank you for choosing to tune into this and learn a little bit more about this project. Looking forward to hearing from you as we move into this next stage of things and addressing any questions you may have as you go through your review. So thanks, everybody. I hope you have a lovely evening.